ES Audio.
From the Evening Standard in London, I'm John Weeks, and this is The Leader.
Could I ask the Honourable Lady, can I make a plea to her and her party to perhaps assist in that and to tell Just Stop Oil to just stop it? Not content in interrupting car runs, they are now intent on interrupting cricket runs. And I'm all for frustrating the Australian batsmen, but I think that is the England cricket team's job. In all seriousness, we've seen some awful scenes this week, particularly at the tennis, and I think it's particularly callous interrupting sporting events, which can turn the course of a match and risk injury to players.
Commons leader Penny Mordaunt in the House of Commons criticising the protests by campaign group Just Stop Oil, a day after their latest action, invading a tennis court at Wimbledon and throwing around orange ticker tape and puzzle pieces. It's the latest example of protesters from the campaign group targeting a major sports event in the UK. It follows the orange powder-throwing man being carried off the Lord's cricket field by England's Johnny Bairstow last week, and the protester who covered a snooker table with the fluorescent powder at the Crucible back in April. At this year's London Pride, where more Just Stop Oil protests were held, the city's mayor, Sadiq Khan, said he backed the action if it's done lawfully.
I'm not sure how Just Stop Oil protesting at a protest helps the cause when it comes to tackling the climate emergency. I agree with campaigning. I agree with campaigning and protesting in a way that's lawful, safe and peaceful. I think Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil are really important pressure groups, trying to put power on those in positions of power and influence. I fully support the right to protest, and it's really important to recognise the joys of a democracy is protest.
Today, though, the policing minister Chris Philp has backed spectators and sports fans doing a Johnny Bairstow, aka taking action themselves to stop the protesters. He said spectators stepping in to deal with such demonstrations would be reasonable, but added that it should first be the job of stewards and marshals. Mr Philp also said that ministers are encouraging organisations to consider taking out injunctions to provide more legal protection. So, as Wimbledon quite literally picks up the pieces from yesterday's disruption, can we expect more Just Stop Oil protests? And should spectators be encouraged to stop their protests? Joining me now is our reporter Lizzie Edmonds, who is at Wimbledon. So Lizzie, what was the vibe like at Wimbledon after the Just Stop Oil disruption yesterday?
In terms of the vibe at Wimbledon, I think everyone was expecting something to happen. There's been quite a significant number of protests in the past few months at major sporting events, and I mean, everyone at the All England Club and also spectators were kind of waiting for it to happen, and so I think many were quite relieved that it had, and that's done now, hopefully, for the rest of the championships. I think there have been increased security measures, such as lots of 100% bag searching, occasional pat down and occasional searches, like body searches of people as well, that is inevitably leading to longer queues to get onto site. So that is causing a bit of frustration with people trying to get on. And I think the debate remains really that people on the whole, I think, are sympathetic to the cause, but just get frustrated if you've spent a lot of money or you've spent a lot of time waiting in lines for tickets to live sports to have it disrupted. So yeah, I think that's the general kind of ethos or vibe of people at the championships following the protests.
That's it. And obviously after those protests yesterday, people have been raising questions online about the security there. But as you said, it does sound quite extensive. And I understand now that they're stopping the sale of puzzle boxes.
Yeah, so some chalk paint was banned. It was listed as a banned substance, which shouldn't impact most people ahead of the championships. And now they have removed jigsaw puzzle boxes from sale because of what's happened. So I think, look, it is extensive. There is extensive security. I'm not sure what else they could really do. But of course, I should imagine that the protesters from yesterday got in on a kind of normal grounds pass, which are quite easily available. You can queue up, thousands of people do, to get those tickets. And, if you were a security person and you saw someone with a Wimbledon puzzle in their bag, you wouldn't you wouldn't think about it, if you know what I mean. So it's tricky. It's tricky to kind of ensure that nothing will happen.
So what have fans and spectators been saying about what happened? And are there any supporters of at least the messaging or even the tactics behind Just Stop Oil's disruption?
I would say broadly people understand the cause but don't think the action is appropriate. Obviously I haven't spoken to lots and lots of fans, but that's very much the kind of ethos of the tennis players. Andy Murray has said that, Heather Watson said that today in an environmental panel that the club put on for kind of media purposes. Yeah, I think nobody can deny what point they're trying to make. It's just, as is the method, suitable. There's also Katie Bolter spoke last night. She was one of the players who was disrupted. That there's elements of safety involved, and that if you are a young, woman in the public eye, which she is, and someone comes running at you and you don't know what they're doing, that's quite scary, and you do fear for your safety. So there's that element of it as well.
Outside of safety, obviously, it is a sports tournament, and disrupting games midway through is going to affect both players and the flow of the game. Has much been said about that, either by the players or others?
Yes, again, Katie actually seemingly kind of came back from the brief break, and stormed through. I think she won 9 points immediately afterwards. So for her, it was quite a positive thing. But inevitably, that means that her opponent probably must have taken it, couldn't manage to, or not as effectively, perhaps, couldn't, process that and move past it. So it will impact players. Of course it will. It will, it's a break that you aren't anticipating with things like the weather, that they break for, or toilet breaks. You can somewhat anticipate that they will come along, but these come out of the blue, and you might be in the zone, and then you're stopped mid-flow. So it is disruptive for them, 100%.
Let's take a short break now. In part 2, Lizzie explains her thoughts on Policing Minister Chris Philp, saying he thinks spectators trying to remove protesters from these events would be reasonable.
That is up to individual discretion, isn't it? And that if people feel able to step in, or that they want to, but I don't know. I don't know whether I would condone it, because then you get into all sorts of different issues that can come up from that sort of thing.
And interestingly today, we heard from Policing Minister Chris Philp. He said that he backed spectators doing a Johnny Bairstow, i.e. taking action to sort of stop protesters. Those comments, fair or foolish?
I mean, look, I think that is, I don't know how seriously people should take that on board, because again, it comes down to safety, doesn't it? I mean, on the whole, these protests are fairly harmless. They obviously don't mean any physical harm, or they haven't, shown that they want to cause physical harm to people in that, because you just don't know. You don't know, and that is up to individual discretion, isn't it? And that if people feel able to step in, or that they want to, but I don't know. I don't know whether I would condone it, because then you get into potential issues of, I don't know, all sorts of different issues that can come up from that sort of thing. So I don't know. I'm not sure that's. I think the jury's a little bit out on that advice, to be honest.
And following on from the disruption, would you say it has marred the event in any way, or are people still enjoying the event as much as they'd have hoped to?
I think people are enjoying it as much as could be hoped. I think, Court 18 is a prestigious court. It's a very historic court. It's the home of the longest ever match at Wimbledon. That's the court where the action took place. And, throwing confetti, it took, I think, about 10 minutes to kind of clear up. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't hugely disruptive. There were things that they could have done that could have been a lot worse. That's not to belittle it at all, but I think people will now try and just move past it and enjoy the tennis. And I think everyone will just be hoping that that's kind of the end of that for 2023.
There's more news, interviews and analysis in the Evening Standard newspaper, and of course online at standard.co.uk. That's The Leader. Thanks for listening. We're back tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock.